As we get a little closer to the teaching of the different skills, what we are going to check now is the lesson plan model that we can follow. This lesson plan model that I am proposing for you in this class is trying to follow the language skills in integration. It includes a pre-stage, a while stage, and a post-stage. As you already know, or we already discussed in class, the pre-stage includes the preparation, and this preparation is usually carried out by generating expectations or interest on the topic from the student, setting a context that is close to the student's reality, and here it's crucial to set clear activities in which students use the language in a real life, even if they don't know how to use that language just yet. You use realia, you present them with materials and objects that are from reality. You focus on expressions and not necessarily on vocabulary. The idea with this is that you present the students with the need to talk, and then you prepare them with expressions that they will be probably using. Not only vocabulary, because we don't go around just using vocabulary when we speak. Of course, in the pre-stage, the discussions and the materials and the activities that we're doing appeal to students' likes and dislikes and interests, while also activating previous schemata and previous knowledge they have. Previous knowledge in terms of the content, which is the topic, and previous knowledge in terms of the language, which is the form that the students will be exploring during the session. Of course, you explore the language that the students already know, and then you let them make mistakes. This is not the moment to make corrections. There is usually, through the setting of a real context, students are exposed to the necessity of use grammar that they usually don't know about or that they need to clarify. So basically, this stage in the pre allows the students to have awareness on the grammar concept. There is teachers' acceptance of errors, and then students are asked to prepare, are prepared through a little steps in the pre in which the content or the topic is explored, and the students are also prepared in the use of the language. Maybe some expressions, grammar, or vocabulary that they will find explicitly presented in the while stage, and they will be using another skill as input. So particularly these three last stages are part of the integration of language skills, because as students are going to be using a specific language, a specific skill during the class, they are also preparing to use that skill by using other skills. In the case that we already had, you are preparing a lesson for listening. So in the pre-stage, before playing the listening, in the pre-stage, you should be using preparation of the content and preparation of the language, and this is usually done through another skill. So before the listening, students can talk about the topic, or they can be presented with vocabulary about that specific topic, and then they can read it, they can talk about it, or they can write about it. Then we go to the while stage. During the while stage, you do guided practice and repetition. Usually, when a lesson plan, you have repetition of elements and patterns, especially in grammar. You always generating a communication need for the exercise provided. So here is where we carried out workshops that are really communicative and not just filling the gaps. In this moment, the teacher usually presents the grammar, and then the student is given the awareness, so they are allowed to do inferences and analysis of the grammar that is being studied. This grammar is usually presented also in the listening that you are going to have, in the listening text or the reading text. So what you do is allowing them to identify the grammar elements that are present in this specific text that you have, either listening or reading text. Of course, this is the moment to make the corrections of the initial mistakes that were presented in the previous activities by the students, and then the teacher does formal presentation of the grammar topic, but you should be focusing on the function, so that is communicative grammar rather than just grammar subject, verb, and complement as a structure that is to be memorized. So no, the idea is that you focus on the function of this. And this function is what is presented in the language function objective, in the function objective that we already have. This is the moment in which the teacher does the activity with the skill. So this is the moment where the students are going to do the listening, where the students write, where the students speak, or where the students read, this is the main skill being used during the session. And then they do the listening or reading comprehension task. So you carry out a listening or reading task activity for seeing if the students really understood the topic. Here is where there is usually a mistake by the teachers. They think that giving the students a workshop for comprehension checking is the post stage. Well, in the model that I am presenting to you, if you want to integrate the skills, then you would be using actually something else in the post stage. So these last two stages here are very connected to the integration of language skills, because you present the language and you carry out the listening, the reading, or the speaking, or the writing activity that is the main focus of the lesson. But then in the post stage, you will be doing something else. And here is where I have this part, the post stage of the lesson. Of course, in the post stage of the lesson, this is a moment to use the language that students already learned or worked with during the session. You personalize the context, you integrate another skill. And here we have a very important part. So if there was a listening focused activity that they carried out in the while, in the post, they should be using this language either by using speaking or writing. There is usually in this post stage students production, and that is free production connected to the topic. This is the moment where you ask the students to complete the narration. This is the moment where you ask them to provide their own experience based on the listening topic that they already discussed. So you are always recycling grammar. And usually, as a good technique to keep on exploring this, you return to the initial context established. Then you assess the listening and the reading of the writing. Of course, all this has to be founded in a clear objective, and the teacher is constantly doing the assessment and feedback because they are transversal moments of the class. I am going to give you an example. If you ask the students to talk about their likes and dislikes in food, then you can ask them about their favorite food and their favorite food on a Sunday. Let's say that you say, okay, we want to eat sancocho. So you say, you ask the students in the pre to talk about their favorite food by asking them about this. Then you ask them to make a list of the ingredients of that favorite food, and then you tell them that you want to prepare sancocho. So you ask them to put all the information about how to prepare a beautiful, delicious sancocho in the river. In the while stage, they would be listening to, so in this case, students are preparing the vocabulary for sancocho using some expressions for preparation of food, and they have already discussed the topic that they are going to encounter in the listening activity. Then you give them a listening in which there are two people talking about making a sancocho and what they usually do in Pance River on a Sunday afternoon. Here, the teacher presents makes the students to complete the list of vocabulary about food and asks the students to write expressions that they hear about preparation of a delicious sancocho, which in this case would be words connected to the preparation and actions for preparing food. Here, then the students are listening. So as a way to have a listening comprehension activity, what I would do as a teacher is give them a text in which they make a list of the steps one by one about preparing sancocho from the listening exercise. Of course, in this listening exercise, the students will have to listen to this one time, then do it again, then take some notes, then listen again. This can be done in groups, this can be done individually. So there are many different possibilities. But basically, after the listening, then we do a listening comprehension activity, which in this case is a form that the teacher wants to have to structure how to make the sancocho. In the post stage, the idea would be to personalize that content, which is they already talked about food they like here in the pre-stage. So they would say, okay, from the food that you already mentioned, now you are going to write your own recipe for making the sancocho, which is the food you like, and then you are going to present it to your partner in a conversation. Or in this way, you are recycling the grammar, which is the steps, and the vocabulary, the steps that were given during the listening and the list of the food, and you return to the initial context, which was talking about their favorite food and talking about making sancocho, but in this case would be making their own favorite food. And then students are using either by speaking, because it's a conversation, or by writing this way of preparing the food. In this sense, then we used in the while we used the listening, but before we used integrated other skills in order to at the end evaluate or assess listening and reading by using speaking or writing. I hope that this has been explanatory and this has been helpful to understand the model that we are going to be using. As you already know, in this activity you had to take notes and prepare questions that you have, so please bring them to class. See you soon.